This training is an integral component of the American Indian Alaska Native Communities and Hospital Advancing Maternity Practices Initiative, which is known as the CHAMPS initiative. Camie will tell us more about it. Funded by the Kellogg Foundation, this initiative focuses on improving maternal and child health through the promotion of baby-friendly practices in tribal Alaska and Native communities. Camie has partnered with Moore-Salas, a hospital-based IBCLC who practices in the Phoenix Greater area, is a member of the Navajo Nation Breastfeeding Coalition, and this multifaceted training that Camie and Kim have been taking throughout Native communities across the nation focuses on the strengths inherent within our Indigenous communities, explicitly supporting self-determination and sovereignty. We are so honored to start off 2019 with this essential learning session, whether we work at the national level, state level, county level, or local level. What we hope, we know that we will be able to apply the lessons from today's sessions in our work. So I am delighted to introduce our panelists. Like I said, Camie is a leader in the field and wears many, many hats as the founder and chair of the Native American Breastfeeding Coalition of Washington, as the founding mother and president-elect of NAPLC, and also as a USBC board member. Camie is a clinical social worker and lactation consultant. She received her Master of Social Work degree from the University of Washington, specializing in maternal mood disorders and the effects of complex intergenerational trauma on attachment, bonding, and parenting practices of Native families. She's worked in the field for a number of years, and with programs that serves pregnant and parenting women and their families in Washington's urban Indian community. Camie is a consultant with the Center for Health Equity Education and Research, the CHAMPS program. She's a member of the Center of Social Inclusion's First Food Racial Equity cohort. And Camie worked as a campaign director with Moms Rising, working to bring paid family and medical leave to Washington State, which was signed into law in July 2017. Yay, Washington. Camie is now a member of the Moms Rising breastfeeding team. So we all know Camie as a trailblazer and a national leader on topics of racial equity and first food justice. She's a mentor to so many in the field. Camie was a member of USBC's Equity Committee, CRASH, for a number of years. She served on the Conference Program Committee, USBC, and was elected to our board in 2018. Welcome, Camie. Our panelists, we are so happy to welcome Kimberly Moore-Salas also. She's not new to the first food field here. Kim combines her experience in peer counseling, clinical and educational lactation with her passion to promote healthy living through kinship values. Kim's work has been inclusive of tribal and culturally diverse communities, serving the needs of prenatal, newborns, and postpartum mothers and families. Kim currently works at the hospital with the Maricopa Integrated Health Systems and also in private practice with the Arizona Breastfeeding Center, which is, very clinically intensive. Kim was recognized with the Tribal Trailblazer Award by USBC for her work and has held many leadership positions, including that as tribal rep and co-chair of the 2018 National Breastfeeding Conference. Currently, Kim serves as the vice president for the Central Arizona Lactation Consultants and was also elected to the USBC board last year. So welcome, Camie and Kim. We are so honored to have you kick off the 2019 Equity webinar series. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right. Is that sounding okay, everyone? I'm just going to go.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Okay, I think I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to hear if anyone says because you're all muted. Um, thank you so much for that really kind introduction, Kinkini. I really appreciate all of that. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the time zones. I'm kind of a night owl, so it's 11 o'clock here in Duwamish country in Seattle. So it's a little morning for me still. Anyhow, this is Camie, and again, Kim and I are really, really honored to be able to present to you this webinar on something that is very, 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 very special to us, which is the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training. I am speaking to you, like I just said, from the land of the Duwamish people. Their chief is Chief Self, who Seattle is named after. My family's been here for a few generations now, but I am a very, very grateful guest of the Duwamish people as a Dakota woman. So I just want to acknowledge where I'm speaking to you from. So for anyone here that's seen me speak, you know I'm terrible with timing. I always go over, and that's really hard to do on webinars because people just start logging off. So I'm going to just jump right in so that Kim and I can get through all of the content that we have, and we really hope that we have time for question and answers as well at the end. So with that, we will begin. In accordance with recognition and thinking of communities and folks that we need to for making this training happen, in the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training, and before jumping into the content and everything that this training is about, I do want to acknowledge and raise our hands to the organizations and funders that really made this possible. The Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training, which I will talk about its birth process, is and was a program of the Center for Health Equity, Education, and Research, their CHAMPS program, which stands for Communities and Hospitals Advancing Maternity Practices. And the primary focus of that work was started in Indian country with the Indian Health Service becoming baby friendly. Where all 13 of our hospitals, birthing hospitals, or hospitals that catch babies in the Indian Health Service, are baby friendly. And that was a project of CHAMPS that spurred a phase, kind of, well, more or less a phase 1 and then a phase 2 of CHAMPS, where we worked in tribal hospitals in Alaska and Oklahoma, as well as hospitals that serve predominantly African American families in the Deep South, with phase 2 of that project going on in Mississippi, where we are seeing hospital after hospital after hospital in Mississippi go baby friendly. So it's really, really, really incredible work. So an arm of CHAMPS was the American Indian Alaska Native program, again, where we worked in hospitals, but the development of this training was part of that. And that was a very generous grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. So thank you to all of those organizations for everything that they've done in supporting the forming of this course, their mentorship along the way, particularly Ann Merewood, who is very special to me and is always, well, I'll talk about it in a minute, but always said, Camie, what do you want to do? And lets me do it. So thank you to them for that. Okay, so a little bit of backstory before, again, I keep saying before we move on, we have some things to talk about, but I think the backstory and what really inspired the development of this course was my experience with becoming a lactation consultant. As you heard, I'm a social worker. I'm a clinical social worker. I'm a therapist. That's what I did. I worked with families on attachment and bonding work. And had an experience with breastfeeding that was quite literally life-changing and set me on a completely different path. Well, I wouldn't say different path, a path that I didn't see myself going on, where the focus of my work really went to way back to breastfeeding and those original attachments and bonds that we make with our babies. So in 2011, in 2010, I had founded the Native American Breastfeeding Coalition of Washington. And then in 2011, I decided I kind of wanted to become a lactation consultant. Like many of us in the field, I kind of fell in love with breastfeeding and started learning a lot about breastfeeding and seeing how it applied to the work that I was already doing. And I just wanted to learn more. I was really interested in the clinical aspects of it, and thought that becoming a lactation consultant would be a helpful thing with what I wanted to do with my work, particularly with serving Native families. So like many of us, I started out with a 45-hour course I took up here in Seattle. It was amazing. It was a great course. Clinically, it was very strong, and I learned a lot. I continued collecting CERPs. I was Pathway 1, so I needed all those 90 hours of breastfeeding education. I attended several breastfeeding conferences, both in person, La Leche conferences, other breastfeeding conferences, as well as online conferences to get, additional CERPs before certificate or to send into IBCLC. Again, really interesting, good content, clinically strong. And then I did an internship. So I did an internship at Seattle Breastfeeding Medicine, where I interned under Dr. Marianne O'Hara and Emily Healy, who was her IBCLC. And they were incredible mentors. And I still claim that I had the most clinically advanced and in-depth internship of any lactation consultant out there. But it was just a really incredible experience. And all along, throughout this entire process, every single person I learned from my 40-hour course to every single client that we served at Seattle Breastfeeding Medicine was white women. And as a Native woman, that stood out to me. I've always, I'm a social worker. Social justice is the foundation of my field. It is at the core of everything that I do. And this wasn't something that I didn't notice. I noticed that I was the only Native woman in the room. I noticed that I was a Native woman serving white families almost exclusively in my internship. Every course that I took, every picture in every course and conference that I took was of white women and their babies. And so this left me, while clinically strong, and I do stand by that, it also left a huge gap in my education, because my goal and my only goal has only been to serve Native families. That has been my life's purpose since I was a young child. I wanted to work in the Native community and serve my community. And so I just really felt like, again, while my training was clinically strong, that it did not speak to the needs and experiences of families in the community that I was actually in. And we have an amazing anthropologist named Aquanda Stanford here at University of Washington, who describes this as the mammification of lactation, where women of color particularly are trained to serve white women. And that was something that, it's a very blunt way of saying things, but that really was what I was learning, right? I learned what blebs look like on white women's breasts, what thrush looks like on white women's breasts, what an abscess looks on a white woman's breast, all of those things. And so when it came time to maybe seeing those things on women with more melanated skin, I'm more at risk of missing those things because I didn't see and get that experience, right? I was told it'll be red, right? Well, it might not be red on someone with really dark skin. So um, that was kind of all in my mind as I was going through my training. And then once I became certified, and again, even on my test, I sat through my IBCLC test and marked every single picture. And I think I had 2 pictures of people of color on my IBCLC test. And they were, one was a woman not even breastfeeding, and the other was to an adoption story. So it was actually a white woman breastfeeding a child of color. Anyhow, so those were all things in my mind, starting back in 2011 when I first became a lactation consultant, and thinking about my education as a Native woman and how I was trained. So like I said, I had been a consultant with CHAMPS, working on the hospital project, doing some education, things like that, doing some consulting. And we got an opportunity for a second round of funding, or a more solid round of funding, for the American Indian Alaska Native arm of CHAMPS. And I was on the phone with Anne Muirwood one day, and she flat out asked me, Camie, what do you want to do? Like, you tell me what you want to do. And as I thought about that, I thought of the education that I had received as a lactation consultant. And I also thought of the things that, as a Native woman in the United States, that are birthrights of mine, or things that my ancestors signed treaties to ensure that I had. And that was self-determination, right? To determine what we need as people, right? This isn't something that someone else can tell us we need. You need this, you need that. We have a right to determine what we need. Self-reliance. We have a right to be able to provide certain resources and trainings, food, whatever that looks like, for our own people. That is something we should be able to do. And then, of course, sovereignty, which means that we are sovereign nations and we can do whatever we want, because we are really in the United States. The way I describe it is we are our own countries. And a lot of folks, especially outside of the Native community, don't really understand that when you step onto an Indian reservation, you are outside of the United States at that point. You are in the land of the Navajo people, or the Chickasaw people, or the Inupiaq people, wherever you are. And so those were things that my ancestors signed treaties for, and gave up land, thousands and thousands and millions of acres of land, to ensure that their future generations had these rights. And so thinking about those things, my answer was that I want to create our own training. I want a Native breastfeeding training that centers Native people in everything that we do. And that was really the birth of the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training. This training is truly for us and by us. It is Native designed, so I am the primary author of the training. It is 45 hours, 5-day course. And I also consulted with others on the training. It is a living, breathing training as well. So we're constantly changing things. Even yesterday, Kim and I were talking about, Kim made some suggestions of some things that she thought we should add in the next training, or in future trainings, which is really how it should be, right? This isn't set in stone. It should be constantly evolving. But it is Native designed. It is Native educators. So there's Kim and I there, our pictures. So we are 2 of maybe between a dozen or 15 Native IBCLCs in the US and Canada. We're still tracking down more, but I think we have pretty much a solid number of how many of us are out there. But having Native educators is something that was really important in this. And then, of course, Native learners. So every single person in our training does have to be Native, First Nations, Indigenous, and that is self-identified. So we are not interested in tribal enrollment, blood quantum, and some of these things for some of you, especially outside of the Native community, may mean nothing, nothing to you, but those are not important to us. We care that you consider yourself Native, that you're accepted as Native in your community and by the people around you, and that is who is welcome to the training. So the training is not for folks that do not identify as Native. This is our logo, which is designed by a wonderful Spokane artist here in Washington named Emma. She did both of our logos. You'll see the next one at the end, but really, really beautiful. So some fundamentals of the IBC training, and from here on out, Kim and I will both oops, I'm so sorry. I forgot you were looking at my screen. Kim and I will both probably interchange IBC and Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor, just make note of that. So the things that we believe in a mother and a baby's ability to feed. We believe that breastfeeding is our traditional practice. That is something that is really key to this. We don't talk about breastfeeding as a way to feed a baby. This is a traditional practice that is to be honored in the same way that our songs, our regalia, our dances, our ceremonies, all of that, breastfeeding is a traditional practice, and it would have been passed down to us from our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and aunties had that those relationships not been interrupted due to colonialism and U.S. government policy. We believe breastfeeding is the foundation of a healthy mother and baby, and healthy mothers and babies are the foundation of a healthy community. We believe that breastfeeding is essential in Indigenous resiliency. I will often talk about breastfeeding as the answer. I really believe that this is a key missing link in a lot of the work that we've been doing in Indian country around resiliency and creating healthy communities. Breastfeeding has, in large part, never been a part of that conversation, and still is. We have a long way to go. This training is hopefully going to change that. Breastfeeding is a community responsibility. We believe in the validity of traditional knowledge. So while Kim and I are both IBCLCs, and we, work in a variety of environments, we also believe in traditional knowledge. And so, yes, we will have things in this training that might not be in quote unquote the evidence base, or might not be quote unquote in a journal article, but we do have thousands of years of evidence of its efficacy, and we will discuss that in conjunction with other more mainstream evidence-based treatments, if that makes sense. We believe in centering Native people in all of our work, and we believe in the importance of providing culturally relevant care. I actually can't see that last word. So yes, care, great. So that's something that is just really, these are our core values of the training. So next we're going to talk about how Kim and I are going to kind of go back and forth on how Native people are centered in the IBC course and what makes us different from other 45-hour courses. I do want to point out that this, we do believe that this course is the equivalent to any other 45-hour 5-day course. We expect this certification to be considered equal to those things. And if we have time later on, we can talk about some of the pushback that is quite frankly pretty prejudiced, where we've been asked some really unfair questions about these things. But our course is different from many of the other 45-hour courses, and in that we center Native people in all that we do. every step along the way as much as we possibly can. And again, we are constantly changing things to make it center Native people even more. So we're going to talk about some key differences or things that we see that we've put into this course that make it special for our community. So we're going to go through talking about invitation, time, images and artistry, honoring breastfeeding education as a birthright, and barrier-free education, ceremony, content, no testing, and lots of hands-on activities. So the first one is invitation. This is something that is really, really important to me, and I field a lot of questions about this because I get questions all the time about when are you going to come to our community, or where is your next training, or please announce your trainings. And I tell people all the time, if you want us to come to your community, we need to be invited. For hundreds of years now, since 1492, many people have come into Native land uninvited. And largely that has not produced very good results. And, thinking about in modern day, this is something that we see all the time, and many tribal communities have experience of people, particularly from the outside, coming in and saying, we think you need this, and we're here to provide it for you. And then you do that and then leave, right? And that is something that we really do not want to be a part of. And this is not something that just folks from non-Native communities do to Native communities. Within the Native community, we do this a lot as well, going into other communities saying, we have this great training, we have this, we are going to do it in your community, and with no acknowledgement of, has the community even asked us for this? Do they even have a problem that needs to be solved? Things like that. So an invitation is essential in this training. We need to be invited to a community to do it. And beyond an invitation, there is hosting that is then involved. So we ask that when we're invited to a community to do this, that our hosts community is actually hosting us. So they will do things like pay for the training, and we're going to talk a little bit more about payment and barrier-free education. But it's the host's responsibility to take care of payment, to take care of our place that we're training at, and to take food for our participants, because they are asking us for this training to begin with. And so once we're invited, then we will begin the conversations. But Kim and I are not necessarily going to go into communities and say, hey, we have this great training, it's really awesome, we'd love to do it in your community. While that sounds great, and we maybe get more trainings out of it, it isn't within really in traditional protocol of how we do things. You ask permission before coming into a community. So that invitation piece is really important. So I'm going to bump over to Kim, and she's going to talk about time.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Kim. Talking about time during the course, we'll be running on Indian time. We are mindful of the communities we are serving, so time we think is a linear concept from European principles, which historically Native people did not use. So start time and during the course, we are flexible. We allow adjustments to be made for content that the participants feel they need more, such as understanding more teachings, maybe concepts. And also we consider communities may have ceremonies or feasts that they need to attend. Maybe they come in late for maybe attending a birth. Some of our participants have been, a lot of them actually have been doulas. So talking through that time concepts. Another great example is Bad River, Wisconsin. We had a young mother that was going to have her baby any day. We spent some time in the afternoon assisting on helping her build her wigwam at her home. So there was a few doulas attendees. So this home birth that has not been taken, has not has not have had in over 100 years. So we took that afternoon to learn and be honored to participate in a great ceremony. Another example is we had a water ceremony that took place in Bemidji. So again, that took some time with singing and prayer. So again, time is flexible, and we adjust that to each community.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that too, that and I love that Kim said, there's things that come up. We had one training where one of our participants on the last day, the night before, her nephew was murdered, right? And we still sent her a certificate because as a Native community, we have higher ACE scores, our traumas and whatnot are experienced at a higher proportion, and we need to acknowledge those things and make room for those things and not penalize people for the experience of their day-to-day lives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about images and artistry, and I hope you all got to see these great pictures of Hope, Mama Hope here, and Kim's in the background, us putting that wigwam together for her. It was just so incredible. We were really hoping to have a baby born, our first IBC baby born, but baby came the day after our training ended. So images and artistry are also a really key component of this training. All of the pictures that we use in the training show Native families and in all facets of their life of parenting. And this takes a lot of time. I mean, even the other, our training in Bad River, which was in September, I finally had a Native mom with really great examples of blebs. And I had asked, before the training, like, can I please take your picture? And so, but prior to that, we hadn't shown pictures of blebs. We had described them and done that, but because I didn't have a picture of a brown breast of a Native person with blebs, I wasn't going to, show pictures of white women's blebs. I mean, that's just something that is really key part of this. So who you're seeing on the screen should be reflective of the community you're in. So here are just some examples of different holds. So we have the mom here on the left. She is breastfeeding in football hold in her cradle board. So we kind of, show that. And then we have a mom using cradle hold, breastfeeding a slightly older infant in a teepee. So yeah, here we have, these are pictures taken from the Blackfeet Memorial Hospital in Browning, Montana. It's a baby-friendly hospital, and Nikki Hannon, a Blackfeet photographer and teacher there, took these photos for us, which was so wonderful. But we have a baby that is, just been born. Baby is getting skin to skin immediately after birth. We have a Blackfeet nurse that's taking care of this Blackfeet baby. And then we have grandma helping with the first latch, right? Here she is helping her little grandchild latch on for the first time. So again, really reflective of that imagery. When people see these pictures, they see themselves in them, which is so important. Here we have, a Blackfeet father with his little micro preemie sweetness here. We have a cesarean section in a tribal hospital as well, skin to skin via cesarean. We also use really colorful slide docks that all celebrate Native mothering. These are photos and pictures that I've been collecting for years, different artwork that celebrates Native mothering and parenting that we then use in the slide docks and all of our different presentations. There's something like, I don't know, 30 different presentations that we could potentially get through in our 5 days. And each one is really colorful and beautiful and has different artwork throughout it. At the end of our manual, also we have all the artwork listed and who the artist is and where to buy it if you want to purchase it, things like that. So really honoring those artists, and we've received permission to use the artwork that we need to receive permission for as well. So just a little look at what our slide docs will look like throughout the training. These are the breasts that we use. So my mother-in-law and I worked on these. I am a quilter as well, so I have quite the fabric stash, and have collected a lot of fabric with native kind of imagery over the years. And I have a lot of Pendleton wool, things like that. And so my mother-in-law and I worked on creating these breasts, sewing them using all of this fabric, because even that, a lot of times we go to breastfeeding trainings and we're given, breasts to use that are white. They're Caucasian breasts, right? They're really light skin, things like that. And so using things that just celebrate like our artistry is nice, because of course, like there's so many different shades of skin. And so it's really hard, even if you are within a certain community, the chances of something matching your skin tone is really unlikely. And so I like using the kind of fun prints and colors and just image and symbols and artwork that speaks to the community. Also things like, how we talk about stuff. So, typically when we talk about stomach size, I'm sure a lot of you learned the same way I did. Day 1 is a cherry. Day 2 is a ping pong ball. Day 2, 3 is a ping pong ball. By day 10, we're at an egg, right? Those kinds of things. Well, at our training in Barrow, Alaska, which is the tundra, there's no cherries there. Like they don't grow there. There's not even trees there. And it's very, very expensive to get certain produce up there. And so we started talking to the women in the training about what are your traditional foods that are around this size, right? And being able to show them, the size. And someone said, for day 1, 5 to 7 mils is a really juicy okpik, which is a salmon berry. Day 3 was the tutu-iri, which is a caribou eyeball. And of course, all of these folks are subsistence hunters, so they use everything in an animal. So a caribou eyeball was completely relevant to them, where Kim and we don't know how big a caribou eyeball is at all, right? But we're letting them drive this conversation and pick things that are relevant to their community. And then, day 10, I'm not going to attempt to say this word in Inupiaq, but it was the bearded seal intestine. I mean, how incredible is that? That was, they knew how big that was, and that would be the size of a stomach for a baby at 10 days. So we just loved that exercise, doing it there. I also have on the right a medicine wheel, which is a symbol that's used in many Native communities around the country, definitely not all. And so we're not going to take the medicine wheel to every, we didn't do the medicine wheel this exercise in Alaska because that's not something that they use. But we did do it in Bad River, right? Or we'll do it at future trainings where it's relevant. But the medicine wheel is a symbol of holistic health and wellness and well-being and balance. It tells us that a person needs to be balanced socially, emotionally, mentally, and physically, spiritually, mentally, physically, and I'm confusing myself. Anyhow, we have these. And so instead of talking about breastfeeding is important for ear infections or respiratory infections and that kind of stuff, we wanted to talk about, why is breastfeeding important spiritually? Why is breastfeeding important mentally, physically, emotionally, right? All of those things. And so participants at Blackfeet, then, are able to take these circles and put them up, and just their answers were amazing. And then at the end, we have this beautiful poster that is filled with hundreds of reasons of why breastfeeding is important. And each one calls to things that are meaningful to the Blackfeet people, right? So, I mean, the Black section is the spiritual section. And so, people were writing about sharing the stories of their ancestors through their milk, that Creator gifted them this perfect milk for their baby, that this is how they connect with their ancestors. Just really, really powerful messages in a way, and kind of moving away from the mainstream messaging of breastfeeding. All right, Kim.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we're honoring our breastfeeding, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I am doing this one, huh? I'm so sorry. I'll go ahead and do it. Sorry, everyone. I was confused. We do have a couple where we go back to back on them. So I'll do this, and then Kim will jump in at the next one. So we really believe that actually, Kim, I'm going to skip to the next one because I can feel a little coughing attack come on, and then we'll go back to this one, okay?
Okay. Okay, so ceremony, when we talk about ceremony, we are honoring our host. What we do is follow what they want us to do and what the community wants us to do. So that will entail prayer, blessing, ceremony, and potluck celebration. So it was really important for us to honor the host and how they want to do such ceremonies, included entailing each of their communities and what that would look like. And a lot of times they would ask their elders permission, or ask elders on how they would start their day, or how we're going to do the meals. So that was really important for us to acknowledge that and be mindful of each community's way of doing ceremony.
Okay, thank you. I got through my coughing attack. Great. So the other one is, we believe that this training and this education is a birthright, and we believe it should be as barrier-free as possible. We have no minimum education requirements at all, which is, I will say, I don't believe any of the other 45-hour courses have minimum educational requirements. However, we have had folks that wanted to take this training, and they received pushback from their higher-ups telling them that they are not educated enough for a clinical training like this. So again, we've had a lot of folks that not a lot, but some folks pushing back on this training and wanting to prevent Native folks from attending it. But it has no minimum educational requirements. We've trained everyone from a teen mom to a medical doctor, and everyone in between. And it's just, really, really incredible. The variety of folks we've had the ability to train, and they bring so much to the course, everyone. It is, again, relevant to any role in the community. So it is not a training just for peer counselors or doulas or nurses or anything like that. We believe that traditionally women have been helping women breastfeed since the beginning of time, that this is a right as Indigenous women in the community. And so you should be able to serve your community regardless of your role or your job or who you are. And especially what letters you have after your name. We strongly believe that this training needs to be free to participants. So this is where we really get into barrier-free training. When we're asked to come to a community, and like I said, we have our hosts, host us, and they come up with the funds to pay for the training. And we will work with them to figure out, throw out some ideas and whatnot. but the host pays for that training, and every single participant in that training cannot be charged in any way for the training. So it is free for them. We believe that a fundamental belief that this is information that belongs with the community. Like I said, this is a traditional practice. And if we talk about breastfeeding as a traditional practice, it just makes sense that it belongs in the community, right? Just like our songs and our ceremonies and dances and other things that belong in the community and are essential in Native resiliency. And that's, a big thing on this being barrier free, is that this information does belong in the community. And our hope is that we will just be giving this information, providing this information back, because again, we've had a disruption in our traditional practices being passed down in the way they should, due to, again, colonialism and government policies and racism and whatnot. So this information belongs with the community, and we believe that mothering should never be a barrier to education. So we do allow babies and children in our trainings, and we have had babies as young as a couple months old. I think our youngest has been around a 6 or 8 weeker, Kim, I don't know if you remember, and up to, we've had 9-year-olds in our training, and older children. We don't want mothering to ever be a barrier to getting education and being able to serve your community. These 3 that you see on this slide were, gosh, Kim and I just love these babies. But our training in Barrow, Alaska, which is where this picture is taken from, we had 12 women, and we were pretty much outnumbered by children. Most of them were between the ages of 11 months and 16 months. And so these kids were, they were all over the place. They were jumping around. They were getting into trouble, and they brought so much joy to our course. And Kim and I, we talked louder, we got on the floor, played with the babies while Kim was teaching, and then we trade off and play with the kids. And it is hard. It is definitely hard. Sometimes to teach in that environment. But at the same time, we had 100% of our participants come from beginning to end every single day, those 5 days, right? And had we not created this environment where they could come, I think we maybe would have ended up certifying 2 or 3, which were the folks that didn't have children. So something that again is really important to us. Some of the things that our participants have said about this is, this was from both from our Bad River training, actually, having a great time learning at the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor course. Super appreciative that the instructors strive that mothering should never be a burden and allow children to be with you during the course. The best part was Jackson could be with me during the training. So blessed to have this opportunity. Right. And both of these moms too, they brought grandparents to the training to watch the kids. And then on the first day, when we were going through kind of the housekeeping and rules and or basically the non-rules that we have for the training, saying your kids can be here. Within like 10 minutes, both those babies were in the room, and the grandparents were off the hook for the rest of the week. They were so happy to be able to be with their babies. And the other thing too is it brings so much to us when we have these kids in the course, because we're able to, we've done tongue tie assessments on these babies, been able to talk about supply, been able to talk about slow weight gain, that kind of stuff, because the kids are in the course and we're able to hear them nursing, right? Like our Bad River training, Kim was like, Camie, I hear that baby smacking a lot. Like, I think we need to check that baby out, right? And then sure enough, like we did a full assessment, and this baby had a pretty solid type 1 tongue tie. So they just bring so much by being there. And the parents really love it. And it does make for a solid learning environment and helps us remember what we're there for as well, which is the babies. All right, Kim.
Oh, okay. Content. For the content, we felt that this course was unique in that we talked about things that other courses did not talk about, such as historical trauma, the water rights issues that's been going on for quite some time, stories, traditional medicine, substance abuse, mental health, and Indian child welfare. And we all talked about this in depth as far as how this impacted communities, and that most of the courses that Cam and I took to become IBCLCs never talked about. So we felt that it was very culturally relevant, and centering our Native people about these and talking about policies and racisms and how this changed our mothering, our parenting, from years before, so that we felt that this content was really important to talk about these things.
Yeah, and just for an example, we spend pretty much the entire first day on historical trauma. We spend that time getting to know each other. And then as we move into the content, it's historical trauma. We do talking circles. We talk about how historical trauma has impacted our communities, mothering in particular, or parenting in particular. And then we start moving into breastfeeding, right? So it's just, it's so important in any training done in Native communities to discuss that as well.
I also want to add to that, Camie, with the historical trauma. I felt like after we talked about that, we made a full circle of how this impacted breastfeeding, like you said, and I felt that people really connected the dots very well to understand why this was so important.
Absolutely. All right. The next one is no test. So we do not test at the end of this course, and that was a really conscious decision. Standardized tests have been shown to produce invalid results when given to Native test takers, and results usually produce lower or less desirable scores for Native test takers. And then we have just immense amount of test anxiety because of those previous two things. So Kim and I really feel it is much more important to spend quality time, and this is where that Indian time really comes into. We spend quality time on topics that the cohort that we're teaching need to learn about, right? We have our agenda, we have our syllabus, we have all these presentations, but like Kim said, if we feel like the group needs to spend an hour and a half on position and latch, then we're going to do that, because by spending more time, more focused time with and letting the learners drive the course and what they're needing to know, they're going to be better at what they do because of it. And that's going to be we'll be able to have a much better or a higher confidence in their ability to retain that information, knowing that we spent the time needed to teach it well. Our training in Bemidji, when we were kind of just going through housekeeping and again, like what the course is going to look like, what we're going to do, the first question that was asked by one of the participants was, is there going to be a test at the end? And when I said no, I mean, there was just like a sigh of relief, right? I mean, she was so anxious about the idea of taking a test, which I completely get. I do the same thing. That's why I'm not a PhD yet, because the anxiety of doing a GRE is really, really up there. And so, we want folks to be in a healthy learning environment. We don't want them to be anxious about a test at the end, or am I going to retain all this information, anything like that. That doesn't make for a solid Indigenous learning environment, which is what we hope to accomplish in our training.
Okay, so lots of hands-on activities during this course. We work with moms, again, like Camie said, with latching and positioning. We also worked on, during our Bad River course, we did hand expression to moms, and I think our group was very, very curious and excited about this because a mom, her baby was 6 months. I'm not sure, but she never knew how to hand express, and she was very excited to show her mom and her grandma on I think it was video chat. And also, we have to remember that some of these communities don't have pumps or hand pumps. So showing this way of hand expression was really important, that we shared that skill to them. And just see the excitement of these mothers to know that they had milk and that they can share this knowledge to, family members that are going to the hospital or don't have access to a pump. I felt like that particular hands-on activity was really, really vital. Also, Camie mentioned that we did assess for tongue tie and how this affected suckling. Again, they were very, very excited about what that looked like and how that impacts milk supply and sometimes pain with mothers. We also bring some tools with us, like nipple shields, pumps, things that we may use to help moms with overcoming breastfeeding difficulty. And usually that starts with a lot of conversations or discussions about why we would use this tool. But it was very impactful for them to use these hands-on activities, but also just to really learn, because we are learners by touching and feeling, and visual learners. So we were able to really focus on a lot of these hands-on activities.
Yeah, and in general, like Native folks, research has shown time and time again that we're more kinesthetic learners. We learn better by doing things hands-on. While we try and do a lot of hands-on activities throughout the course, it is something that is always when we do evaluations at the end of what are things that we can do better or to improve on the course, and it's more hands-on activities. So, trying to do more is even better. And moving around, I love this picture on the right of Nicole and Flora working on side lying. And for side lying, Kim and I took the entire class up to our hotel room. So this is our hotel rooms. We had people practicing side lying on each of our beds, and being able to use the pillows and really show them an environment that worked. And I think those examples speak to not just the importance of hands-on activities, but what happens in an Indigenous environment, an all Native space, right? Feeling comfortable bringing all of these women up to our hotel room, right? And getting in our beds, things like that, creating a relationship with them that we don't necessarily see with other instructors, learners, right? Our Bad River training, we all went to the movies one night. We went out to dinner multiple nights with participants, things like that. So creating this really safe, inclusive, all Native space is so important, and makes for really easy learning, but also really easy teaching, which was something that I never expected to experience. So this is one of Kim's activities, teaching how to latch on a baby without looking or doing hands-on. Lots of talking. Here she is doing hand expression, which Kim's a pro hand expresser. So next we're going to talk about our cohorts. We've taught 3 trainings in our first year, which is September to September, which was really exciting. Our first training was in Barrow, Alaska, like we've said. It is on the Arctic slope, on the north slope of the Arctic Ocean. It is the land of the Inupiaq people, and it's the most northern town in the United States of America. So we did our training at a hotel called Top of the World. This is our cohort. So we ended up certifying 12 women in this training. About half were from Barrow, which is the larger village. It's about between 3,000 and 4,000 people live there. And then we had there's surrounding villages that have anywhere from 80 to around 400 people in each of those villages. And we had someone from each of the other villages in that training. And this was just such a wonderful first training. And Abra, who's in the center in the black and white skirt, was just such a huge champion at making and bringing this training to Barrow. It was so magical, like for a first training. Everyone was awesome. And in thinking about these women, the closest IBCLC for them is in Anchorage, which is a plane ride and hundreds of dollars away. To say like you need to go see an IBCLC for your breastfeeding problems is just not a possibility. But now they have women in the community with foundational breastfeeding knowledge to be able to help with breastfeeding problems, pretty common breastfeeding problems, but we even go a little deeper with some of the things. Like I said, we go over assessing for tongue ties, things like that. I don't necessarily think that anyone's doing that at this point, but we're going to go through it because otherwise, the only people that are going to be able to do it are a plane ride away, which is a lot of times not accessible for a community that is disproportionately affected by poverty. So this was our amazing first cohort, us in front of the ocean on our last day, which Kim and I jumped in later that afternoon.
On the first day.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bemidji 2018, I believe this was in June of last year. Yeah. This was our largest group, very emotional gathering. One of our great, wonderful friends, Millicent, she brought us here to Minnesota, Bemidji, and it was a funny story that she kept keeping the registration open, and there was no cutoff time, so we had a lot of registration for attendees. So at this particular gathering, we were able to certify 60 certified IBCs, one male. But throughout the course, there were 78 that came through from the community. So this was a really large group. Camie was very emotional during this time. It was so awesome. Camie, do you have the breakdown of which nations showed up to these?
Oh, I don't have all the tribal breakdown, but this was definitely our most diverse training. We had folks from Canada that came down for this training. We had North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, California, New Hampshire, and then we had a Maori woman.
That's right.
As well come to the training. And so this was one that people traveled to come to. And Millicent is just an incredible woman who hosted all of us in the most beautiful way. And as Kim said, I mean, this was something that this was definitely a life-changing moment in the sense of it solidified how important this course is to our communities. Our first training was 12 people, right? And to have our second training over the course of 5 days, have 80 people come to it, come in, check it out, sit in for a day, and then of course we had all the folks we certified that were there for the whole time. It was overwhelming, and just it again was a testament to how much this is needed in our community and how much it's been wanted. And it was awesome, and I cried almost every day. It was amazing.
I just want to share that some of our participants were doulas, full spectrum doulas, nurse practitioners, and they all took away something from this course, talking about the content of things that they never got to talk about in their learning. And just learning something new was amazing. Okay. Bad River, this was our next gathering. Here we certified 17.
Yes.
17, so Bad River is located in Wisconsin. This was when we had the Mother Hope that we helped assist build her wigwam. And so she was present throughout the whole course. Is she in this picture?
No, I think this was our last day, so she was in labor.
Yeah.
The last day.
Yeah, so this was also an amazing course, and it was so good. All I can say was these women were very highly motivated, and they contacted us individually months later, helping mothers in their communities. That's what's great about this course is these women go back to their communities and help their members and reach out if they need more assistance. So we were able to walk through some of these questions or situations they had with their community members.
Yeah, and one of my favorite stories from this too is the woman there in the center in the purple hoodie. She's the sister of the girl behind her, the woman behind her in the blue shirt, and she came to help with her nephew. She was just gonna help with, diapers, like that kind of stuff, came on the first day so that her sister could attend the training. And then she ended up getting certified. She came for all 5 days. Her plan was to just come for the first day to help out. And then she ended up coming all 5 days. They took the bus in every day, took the bus home every day to attend the training. So it was really awesome to have that. And they were hilarious and brought so much joy to the training.
Yeah, and also the breastfeeding Jeopardy that they were very competitive at.
Yeah, we do a breastfeeding, Jeopardy, kind of a refresher at the end of the course, and they had some sisterly rivalry going on. All right, so last is we're just going to talk about response, what we've heard. So we do evaluations each day, and then we also do evaluations at the end of the course about the whole thing. And one of the questions we ask is what was the most beneficial aspect of this course? And I'm just going to read through some of these, and then we'll talk about next steps, and then we'll be done. So one participant said being able to ask questions and not feel embarrassed. Again, this is about creating a learning environment that is really open, that's inclusive, that recognizes that you don't have to be a nurse to take this training, things like that. So we do have questions that are asked that might seem very basic, but we are going to honor those questions and answer them and put time into them just as we would a more complex question. The course was so in depth. So again, while we do take time out for ceremony, we are on Indian time, we do kind of do things our own way. Clinically, this is still a really strong course. We get in a lot of information in these 5 days, and we feel really confident with this foundational training that we send these Indigenous breastfeeding counselors out into the world with. Another participant said it was totally native. To be in a room with strong Indigenous women was the most empowering experience of my life. Being able to be my authentic self. Something that I'm sure a lot of folks, particularly folks of color, can identify with this. We often call this code switching, acting different in different groups, things like that, to be able to, get by and do what we need to do. And so being in an environment where they can be their authentic selves and learn in that way is so beneficial. And I will say too, and I don't know if Kim may feel the same way, but as instructors, to be able to be our authentic selves is pretty amazing too as instructors. We can make little jokes here and there, do things that we maybe wouldn't do with a more diverse group of folks or folks from outside the community. And so it makes for a really easy teaching environment.
Absolutely.
We have all around excellent. I felt right at home, even when the information was new to me. I didn't have to hide my identity or catch others up to speed with history for them to understand me. And this is really why we have created a safe space for Native people. It's this person's, their response to that question, right? When we have a more mixed group, which I do lots of teaching in more diverse groups, but we typically will then have to teach to those folks. We have to catch them up. We have to talk about things like racism, bias. There's not necessarily this shared history, where in the Native community, we can go into the Native community, we can say things like boarding schools, and no one in that community thinks that I'm talking about, rich kids in upstate New York kind of thing. Like, that is not what they know. Exactly what I mean when I talk about a boarding school in the Native community. We don't have to spend time on that history, and that takes that burden off of us as, and I'm saying us as when we're learners, so our learners in the environment, it takes the burden off of them that they don't have to educate folks around them who don't know what we're talking about, right? They can actually be there, be focused, and learn, which is what is most important. Another person says, in my 10 years in birth work, I've always been the only Native. So to attend a workshop with Indigenous women from across North America was the fulfillment of a long time dream. Someone else says, where do I start? The stats, the demos, the feedback, attendees, the flexibility in the schedule, the ceremonies, prayers, elders' knowledge. Okay, how Indigenous it was. Okay. Another participant said, I'm 67 years old, and this is the first time I've had a Native teacher. It makes a difference, Natives teaching Natives. It felt good to have something made for us. This is one of the most important things I have ever accomplished. And then last, someone says, the empowerment of our trainers, that we have the knowledge and leadership to teach this inherent right of breastfeeding. This was exciting and empowering on a spiritual level. And you can tell I'm already crying. All right. So next, we want to just talk a little bit about what IBCs have done in the last year as we move into 2019. So we had 3 IBCs attend the USBC 2018 conference, which was really, really, really exciting to have them there. We've had at least 5 tribal breastfeeding and birth coalitions be formed out of the IBC training. This is something that we do take time. That started actually in the Bemidji course, where there was a discussion around creating tribal coalitions, and some of our participants from a particular state being told by their state breastfeeding coalition that they couldn't do that without them, basically. And that spurred a conversation. This was just during lunch, where I was like, that is not true. You do not need that. You just need another person. Coalition is built. And we kind of turned that into a lunch and learn, where instead of taking a break for lunch, we spent lunch talking about coalition building and some of the challenges that folks in our trainings have experienced from their state coalitions, particularly with gatekeeping. So we've now integrated that into our trainings and are really encouraging folks to build coalitions. We're working with them. Kim and I will help mentor them in that. We're encouraging them to come to USBC, to join USBC, the IBC training. We will pay for the first year membership to any tribal breastfeeding coalition into USBC. So we really want to foster that leadership in our IBCs. And then we, of course, have countless Native families that have been supported in their breastfeeding goals. So we have participants that, put up flyers. We had one mom up in our Barrow training who's from a very small village, and she, put up posters around town saying like, are you breastfeeding? Do you have problems, or challenges or need support? Call, and then she put her name. And the best part was all she had to do was put her name, because the village is so small that she didn't actually need to put her phone number. Everyone knows exactly who she is and how to get a hold of her. So, that we have other IBCs that are, putting this on their business cards. They're promoting it. They're saying, I'm an Indigenous breastfeeding counselor. I can serve your community. I can serve our community. I can help people with breastfeeding challenges. So that's really, really exciting. And then we have coming up next. So I will say this is a big caveat. So far, some of these trainings are not set in stone. A few are very, very, very close to being set in stone. But I feel really confident in saying that our trainings for 2019 are the following. So we will most likely be doing a training in Seattle, which will be our first urban training in the spring. We will be in Standing Rock in April. We're going to be in Michigan in May. We're going to be with the Oneida people in Wisconsin in July. And we are so excited to be doing a training for Indigenous Hawaiians in Hawaii in October. There may be more to come. We're still, holding out for a training in the Southwest and really hoping that comes together. But I'm so thrilled with the 2019 schedule. We're going to be really busy, and we just hope it will continue to grow from there. So with that, I think we're done, and I can't even see a clock, so I don't even know what time it is. It looks like most of you are stuck with us, so thank you.
It's 1:22 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Okay, all right. I think we went over then, huh?
You did not. This is Kimberly, and thank you, Camie and Kim. I think there are times when there are just no words to do justice to what we just heard of how do we summarize, how do we take the highlights of it. Pretty much everything you said was a highlight. So thank you for what you do and for just so many ways in which honoring and creating such a joyful way to learn and build on the strengths and the richness of the communities and to build the resiliency together. Just so adaptable, so